Tom Hoffarth, welcome to the Bookshelf Conversations.
I enjoy having bookshelves and conversations.
Now, we go back a ways. I've always admired your work all the time, but especially in April. For the last, you'll tell me how many years you've been doing a feature in which you review a baseball book a day, usually coinciding with the start of the season. The season was delayed a little bit, so we're your reviews. And since we're both in the book reviewing business, so of course you as a journalist, formerly with the Los Angeles Daily News, uh, with your own blog, Farther Off the Wall. Uh, you do a deeper dive into a lot of these book reviews than I do. I do pretty much a straight review, but you find all sorts of connections and tangents and whatnot. So, when did you start doing these?
Well, because I was a sports media writer for the Daily News, and I did that for about 30 years. I felt it was more than just television and radio. It had to go into movies since we were in LA, and which in theater, and to me, books were an important part of it because so many of the movies and TV shows were based on books. And one of my first recollections of going back was the Jim Bouton book, being turned into a TV show. Not a very good one,
No,
but
not a
you
very
just
good
saw,
one at
not a,
all.
but you just saw how, right. And the great part is he can write about it. But so I just thought cultivating books was a book review was an important element of this. And I think what happened was I was looking back to see when this had started was the early 20, I think it was 2011, 2012, around that time. And what was kind of the launching point was the Dodgers had just hired Don Mattingly as a manager. And some people didn't only knew about his, not that much about him in LA. They just knew Joe Torre came. He was kind of a package deal. Torre leaves, Mattingly comes into the job, and there's a biography about him, called Donnie Baseball, the definitive biography. And I thought, well, this, maybe I'll talk to the writer, figure out, this is kind of intro into, and it was such a terrible book that I thought, wow, I hope people don't buy this, but how can I tell them that in a nice way? Because I don't want to just skewer this guy. I don't know him. So I timed it on April 1st because I think the season started then. So then I wrote that as my first review, and I started getting a stack of books. So I said, oh, I'll review this one too. So I just started doing this, and it was only on the blog because I was going to cultivate anything that was good. I was going to sort of transfer it to the newspaper and a website version story. And as I kind of got through the books, there was Costa Kennedy did the 56 Joe DiMaggio book. So then it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so it was I just ended up with this collection of about 30 books, and they sort of filled each day. I didn't intend to do it that way. And I go, this was kind of a fun exercise. You sort of whip through them. And then what I sort of remembered at the time, there was a book by Josh Wilker called Cardboard Gods. And this came before I started it, but I really appreciated the fact that he could look at baseball cards and bring memories back of different things, different tangents. So I started doing the book reviews kind of as I would do baseball cards. A book would trigger a memory or trigger something else, and that would lead me to search for something else. And so I think the books just became a launching point for me to write an essay about something that was baseball related or life related. And from there, I could review the book, and then I could put all these other links to it. So it was a challenge to me every year to see how many books I could read early and then get them all lined up for April. So that was kind of the fun part. So if you do the math, that's more than 300, 400 books reviewed or at least covered since that time. And that doesn't even take into account how in 2020, when COVID hit, I had all these books read, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to start launching them now. It's the middle of March. People need something to do. And I ended up doing like 60 books that year. I just kept reading and reading and getting new books. And it was just like, that was sort of my cathartic way to get through the pandemic, was just keep reading books and keep posting. And so I kind of ran out of steam. I was like, I was part of the big newspaper purge that happens in a lot of places. So I got purged in 2018. And luckily, a lot of my stuff stayed up on blogs or the Wayback Machine or different ways that you can kind of capture it. And you, luckily, lucky for me, you captured a lot of my lists. So on your blogs, I can link back to that. Oh, here's the 30 books I did that year. I forgot which ones, and you've got them logged there because I was so grateful that you would sort of here's the latest list of things that he's been doing. So it kind of got me to this point where now I would, back when, especially during the winter when it's, there's nothing to do, you start sort of searching through Amazon, what books are coming up, what can I look forward to, start making a list. Is there 30 books worth? Yeah, okay, let's try it. And then as the time comes up, new books start landing, some don't land. You've got this whole, some publishers are really good with deadlines, some aren't. So you start putting this list together and you just sort of rearranging it, lining it up. I've always lined up a book for April 15th on Jackie Robinson, and there's always seems to be a new book that comes out. So that's kind of nice to slot in there. And so this year I wasn't ready at the beginning of April. So I just decided to launch on April 15th with, again, Costa Kennedy, kind of full circle of life, coming up with his True book. And it was kind of neat to, do a Q&A with him as you did. And again, that's how we sort of reconnected on this. We like to compare notes and things that we're doing. And so I look up and today I posted my 9th one in 10 days. I had no idea I was doing it that fast. So that's kind of how it started and where it is today. But you were included on one of those lists with your 501 books.
Thank you.
Because it fit right in. And I think we did a Q&A at the beginning of April, and then I used your book as kind of the end point. But it was, it's just been a fun thing to do. And you like me, we want to be entertained and informed. And if a book can hold our attention, we'll dig into it and tell people about it, or we'll tell them not to do it. Which, again, Donnie Baseball, if you're still thinking about buying it, I wouldn't.
So what kind of criteria do you have for what you will include? Being in California, I do notice a tendency to focus on books about the Dodgers, about the Angels,
Right. Right.
baseball in Southern California. But other than that, because time and space is limited, what do you want to include?
I'm open to it because I think as I just sort of cast a net, I'm looking for a local interest, Dodger Angels, but I'm also looking for a national. I love history, so Brooklyn Dodgers, anything like that, anything with the O'Malley's and those things. But I sort of expanded it to fiction only if people were talking about it. And I rarely read baseball fiction, but some of them obviously could have some good shelf, like some good evergreen shelf life. So I want to stay on top of that. There was the what was it, the Resistors last year with Gish Jen. I mean, that was getting a lot of pub, and I had no idea it was on my radar, so I got it and I read it, and it was not something I was interested in, but I thought it was worth covering. So children's books, once in a while one crosses the radar that's worth sort of checking out. I thought a couple years ago, was it last year, the one by Glenn Burke came out, and I thought it was a children's or like a middle school
young adult book.
Yeah, and then you read it and you go, this is really good adult book, even if it was intended for middle school kids. It was really, it might not be again something you'd pick up and think I'm going to get something out of it. So it was really, I love the fact, I love to be surprised. And I'll give you another one from a New York point of view. When I did the list of books, I had Devin Gordon's book about the Mets, so many white losing some, and I set it aside and I just picked it up when I started reading it. It was so hilarious to me, the way it was well written. I got through it and I said, this is like the surprise gem of the books, because I did not expect to do. Whenever I see a Met or Yankee book, to me, like we've talked, so much is done on it, so much is regurgitated. I go, it's what can be fresh about this? Kind of like Jackie Robinson. You've beaten a subject to death. What new angle can you give me? And Devin's book was just so funny with everything that it just made me want to go for it. So again, I love those kind of pleasant surprises.
Well, let's go back to fiction a little bit, because I have an aversion to fiction only because I know how hard, I mean, all writers work hard, but I know how hard novelists work on their subject. And I've found frequently that uh, it's rare that a really, really good one comes along. The
Yep.
Resistance, like you say, got a lot of buzz, and I'm wondering what some of you, if you recall, some of the other fiction books you've read. I especially try to stay away, and all due respect again to the authors, self-published fiction.
Yep.
Self-public work in general, I tend to stay away from for a variety
Right.
of reasons, all due respect, but especially fiction, because I have found in many cases that they're self-published because there's not a lot of time and money to put into it, so they take shortcuts.
Yeah.
And
And it
more,
shows.
it does show more than a
Yeah.
few have not had it proofread, which
Yeah.
drives me up the wall. Not that
Yeah.
I'm, people who read my stuff know that I'm, if not the king of typos, at least the prince. So, so
I'm in your court. I'm in that ball game too. Yeah. Self-editing, self-publishing, writing.
so does anything
You
fiction-wise stand out to you?
well, I think what I would worry about is if I, again, with the, I look over here because it's on my shelf, with Jen's book, The Resistors, I worry that, well, maybe there's another, The Natural, another Bernard Malamud book that's out there that's going to come and sweep. I think the example that we both agreed with was the one about that came out a couple years ago that everyone was talking about. What was that? The
The art of
infield,
feeling.
the art, yeah, the art of feeling. Right, terrible,
Uh-huh.
terrible book. I didn't like it, but I felt like I had to read it and at least come out with some opinion of it because it was getting so much attention.
For
So
those who are unaware, the art of fielding garnered a huge advance for the author at the time. His name escapes me. It got a lot of buzz, and it was one of these things I always felt. It's like, in a sense, it's like art. That if you don't
yeah, it's a lot
like
like
it,
art.
then there's
Yeah,
something wrong with you. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong
right,
with the product. It's something wrong with you. And I kind of
right.
resent that a little bit, speaking personally. And I just did not like it. It was a huge book. It was quite a big book, and I found very few negative reviews about it.
But then again, I read the book Cactus League, which
Mhm.
came out a couple years ago, and I thought it was enjoyable, and I got something out of it, and it gave me something to pass the time, and it wasn't, again, you're right. I think it's like fiction seems like abstract art where you can have, there's no wrong opinion of it except when it doesn't please you. So, and you don't want to, because writing's such a personal thing, you don't want to, your tension is not to skewer the author or to make them feel bad about it. So sometimes it's easier to say, that's a whole different thing we don't need to deal with. But sometimes I just think it needs to be addressed. And, most baseball books are either going to be biographies, autobiographies, or history. Um, and, once in a while you'll come up with a great one. Like I was reading the other day about the Dodgers and Pablo Mora did about their current structure. And that to me was fascinating about how he used a lot of current information to sort of put together why the Dodgers are the way they are with everybody else the way they are and why they succeed at it. So that was more of a current event kind of thing. And I thought it was really helpful for people who want to know sort of where the game is today and why things happen. Um, so yeah, I'll resist a fiction book, but I'll do it only if it's kind of a paper cut in the whole situation. I'll take the paper cut if I can get it done and get it out there. But for the most part, like we did too, I'd like to read a book cover to cover. Sometimes I don't have the time, or I can tell just from reading it, I don't need to read it all the way through. I got the gist of it. And I don't want to regurgitate it. My job, I think, as a reviewer, you don't want to regurgitate the whole thing. I hate reading reviews where the person just tells you everything about what you already want to read. So why would I read the book if you just told me everything yourself? So knowing that reviews, I don't like to do those kind of reviews. I would just like to get the sample and just pick some plums off of that tree just to give people a taste of what the book's about rather than lay it all out for them. But I think with a fiction book, you have to read it because maybe it's a terrible book 2/3 of the way and somehow it picks up at the end and it has an ending that you wouldn't expect. So so that's the other thing. You have to commit the time to a fiction book, which I don't always want to do, but we'll do it. So
Over the past several, well, let's go back. Over the past several decades, have you noticed a change in the trend of books, like the topics of books? For example, when I was a kid, all the biographies were heroic in a sense. There was never anything negative to say about a player. The turning point came, of course, with The Ball Four by Jim Bouton, The Bronx Zoo by Sparky Lyle, to the extent where most autobiographies and memoirs these days, you have to have either some adversity to overcome, some complaint to be made, someone to be ratted out, some situation to be ratted out. So have you noticed something similar in the way the industry has changed what it will publish?
yeah, it seems like you have to really sell it before you even write it, or pitch it. And then it picks up all this steam, whether it's through podcasts or TV interviews or things like that. It has to have some sort of a life cycle. So if a publisher doesn't see that sort of projection on a book, it probably will shy away from it. And then it ends up being done by maybe a lesser publisher or self-published, like you say, if the guy really wants to pay to get it out, his story. And again, you can tell the difference when a book's not edited well, when a book doesn't deserve to be 278 pages. It could have been a magazine story. So I guess the thing I notice is a lot of salesmanship in what the story is about, because if it's just a plain old biography or a plain old history book, again, it might just kind of get lost in the shuffle. But that's the kind of shuffle I like going through. I like to see if there's a decent book that's going to get overlooked because it looks too academic or something like that. So it almost seems like your book has to have a lot of pizzazz and sizzle, or it's going to be very academic, like a Saber related book. Because those seem to be the two that are acceptable. Anything in between just doesn't seem to fit right. I wonder too if books are written now, especially by writers, in the hopes that they'll get picked up as a screenplay or something like that, because that's another sort of motivation for people who live out here. I mean, an example of that, not baseball related, is Jeff Pearlman's book Showtime, that's now turned into an HBO show. So a lot of times they pursue these subjects knowing, hey, there's going to be another step to this. If I sell the rights, then I won. During COVID, I think some people just started knocking out books because they had nothing to do, like the Bobby Valentine book. Even admits, Goldenbach called me up. I had nothing to do. Let's do a book. And the only reason I reviewed it, after you and I talked about it, I put it aside. And now he's showing up on my TV, doing Angel pregame show. And the question is, wow, what's his angle here? Because Valentine always has an angle to something. So you're trying to figure out what it is. Is he trying to wait for Joe Madden to get fired? He's going to step in. So that made it a sort of a relevant book for people who are familiar with what I was doing. So I could put that sort of slant on it. To answer your question, I think that's kind of where it is. Where do you sort of see it? Do you sort of kind of see it that way too, or?
Well, certainly over the past couple of years since the Houston Astros cheating scandal, that is a popular theme.
Yeah.
A while back, I'm guessing, and I can't remember exactly when this started, but there were books going back into the early 90s, I'm guessing, about how to fix the game.
Yeah, the Bob Costas.
Exactly, Bob Costas. Yeah. Others in the media world.
George Will, and yeah.
things that are wrong, and certainly there are different things wrong with the game now than there were
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
Uh, Going back a little bit, what you said about finding a publisher, there are publishers that are wonderful for those esoteric kinds of things. University of Nebraska Press,
yeah,
among them, they will pick up on those historical books am I remembering correctly? Is the Red Barber book
yeah,
one of those from
yeah,
University of Nebraska Press?
right,
Those are hefty, well researched books that might not appeal to Harper Collins or
sure.
Hachette or anybody else who the popular mainstream, those who are watching will notice. Like Keith Hernandez, who announces for the Mets, is always talking about his cat Haji, and this is one of our cats. This is Mo, and Mo wants attention right now, so I'm not going
I don't
to
see my cat. I don't see my
explain.
cat Bailey in the background now either. He was here somewhere.
So, so as long as he doesn't start knocking the computer over, we're good. Uh, and as far, but there's also publishers like Triumph. They do uh,
Yeah,
one of the things that I don't want to say I don't like, but there are these formulaic types of books, and Triumph does a good job with what they do, but they'll put out the same book about various franchises, basically.
right, right, right. They figure one, they get a catchy list kind of thing, and then they'll do it for everybody. The things you have to know, the trivia, that kind of stuff. What themes from the locker room, whatever inside the locker room, those kind of things. And then they find somebody to write them, and those are, they're very trendy. And I think a lot of baseball publisher or writers and publishers always think, what can we sell on Father's Day and Christmas?
Mhm.
It kind of seems to think, and that's why I think a lot of these come out in April, May, kind of, to get a little momentum. And Christmas time, they seem to, a lot of the other baseball book, the other wave seems to come out October, World Series time. So um, again, if you're looking at it from a purely financial success, I think when you accept a book as an idea, you almost have to think, how's this going to do first printing? How are we going to do in paperback? What are we going to go doing forward? Can we do an audio book with them? Especially an audio book is something, again, I don't listen to much, but I would think has a lot of value if the person who wrote it can tell you the story, especially if they've got a great speaking voice. Like, who wouldn't want to hear Vin Scully do his own autobiography? It's not going to happen. He's not even going to let anybody do a biography on him while he's alive, and he's already told everybody that. But it hasn't prevented me from keeping a stack of things that ready to go. And Kurt Smith's already tried to do that himself too, because he's a public figure. So again, with the Red Barber thing, if you want to know Vin Scully's story and what he's all about, you almost have to read this Red Barber book, because that's kind of that was his mentor. So and they didn't always get along. So that was the other part, the good part about in the book, is that they just talk about this mentor teacher, mentor student relationship they had that Vin always wasn't pleased with. And Red was a bit persnickety with some of his with ways he did things. But that's another thing that you sort of have to keep in mind, is when you see a book, what's going to follow it up, or where does this lead to another book? And in publishing, since that's not what we're sort of that's not our specialty. We sort of have to become aware of the what's your end game here, what's your intent on putting this book out. And to me, the funny example of that came up recently with these two books, Baseball Rebels and Major League Rebels. And to me, it was almost a business story rather than it was a book review. How these two guys wrote this book for Nebraska, had too much information. Nebraska wouldn't take it. They spin off another book about it, sell it to Roman and Littlefield, and they do it, and they come out at the same time. So you've got these two books, companion books, but they're really competing with each other, and there's so much overlap. To me, it was just an interesting story about the way the business runs and how these two guys could milk a second book out of it.
I did ask one of the authors, Peter Dreyer, about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he basically said one book was focused on the players and the personnel who were these rebels, and the other one was, again, like you say, more business related, and a different kind of impact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's where you and I we have fun too when we get to talk to the people and have them.
Absolutely,
And
that's a big
then you
part of
get
it.
more you get way more context. What excited you about this book? You know, because nobody's doing this to make a huge amount of money, you know, realistically. So it's a labor of love. And you've got these guys who have become experts at certain things, like Chris Lamb is such an expert at social justice books, and Jackie Robinson, I just read his other book today, Stolen Dreams. And you sort of know these are the guys you want to have write these kind of books because they've got so much great experience and they know it. And you just you wait for their next effort like that. So um, um, uh, what are you reading one or two right now? You kind of got juggling around.
I just finished Kostya's new book about Jackie Robinson, True, the Four Seasons of Jackie Robinson, and he will be the next bookshelf conversation I post. I spoke with him last week. I'm just getting back to this after a long layoff. I have a backlog of books, just
Good, yeah, yep,
to get through. I have an annual thing I do for bookreporter.com about some of the baseball books that are coming out. Nothing pops into my head at the moment.
yeah.
am actually reading uh, a novel, baseball, which is kind of like an in-between thing to just to relax a little bit.
I do that too. I'm reading both books about Buster Keaton right now. There's two books out about him, about his life, and it's just great to kind of, you know, divert into something else, and then you get to read a different style of writing, and some of the writers who are specialized in those kind of books, they can take the same subject and do a whole different biography about the same guy, depending on whether you're like an academic and you like to do research, or whether you're the person who likes to storytell and weave in, you know, interviews and things like that. So I find I get reading other books is also kind of a healthy thing for my brain to process non-baseball kind of things. So you're not
One of
always
the
reading
things,
about the same thing.
one of the things I did ask Kennedy about is, as you say, like every year there seems to be another book about Jackie Robinson. Of course, this is
Yeah,
the 75th anniversary
yeah,
of his debut, so it's extremely appropriate that a book comes out at this time. And I asked about that, and I asked Jane Levy,
yeah.
author of an excellent book about Sandy Koufax. Over the years, I mean, certainly in this digital age, research has changed
Oh,
immensely. You practically don't have to leave the house to
yeah,
do research because you can find all this information online. When I was doing my book about Hank Greenberg, I
yeah,
didn't have to go anywhere. It's different when you're writing about a player who's long since passed, like a Babe Ruth or Walter Johnson or Ted Williams. Uh, well, Ted Williams is not that long ago passed, but the availability of material out there, I was able to contact all the libraries. And back in the day when Greenberg was playing, there were only 16 teams, and many cities had multiple teams. You know, New York had 3 teams, St. Louis had 2 teams, Chicago had 2 teams. So there's a plethora of information available digitally from the public libraries who are
yeah,
nice enough to put the stuff online and make it available. So I didn't have to go anywhere to do all of
yeah.
the
Newspaper.com has been like a huge resource for
absolutely.
people. You get to
So
read the little local newspapers that, you know, you would never have seen before. It's all there. Like the fellow that did the book last year about the little minor league team in Texas. Um, I'm blanking on that, but you know, without access to all those little newspapers, he's got all these great nuggets of new information.
and this was back in the day when, excuse me, this was back in the day when cities had multiple newspapers, as opposed to today, where
Yeah,
sometimes you
so
can't find one.
homogenized. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Putting you on the spot, quickly off the top of your head, favorite book that you've reviewed?
Ever?
Uh, that you've reviewed, not that you've read, because I'm sure there are things
Oh
that
yeah,
you've
yeah,
read
yeah.
that you didn't review.
Um, yeah, that is on the spot. I hadn't even thought about that, but I'm sure one will pop into my head sooner or later.
Okay,
I think,
let's ask another question. Is there
yeah.
a book that hasn't been written that you want to see?
Um,
Because one of the things I dislike saying I'm enjoying it now, but there are a few books that have come out about the COVID seasons, and I find
yeah.
that you don't like those because I
Well, to
find it.
me,
Go ahead.
I guess to me, I read the bad one about the Dodgers. I think
Uh-huh.
the Yankee one was fine. The one about the Dodgers was like, I didn't need to relive that. I just wanted to move on from it,
Fair enough.
even though it was a championship team. To me, the guy who wrote it was not that much of an insider. It was their, backup play-by-play guy. And it was done as I was talking to people on the team, they were like, I didn't know he was writing a book. That's not cool. How did he sort of get permission to do this? You sort of have to get it approved or go through the right channels. And he just kind of did it because he felt like he could do it. And it's like, and it didn't make my review list because it came out so late. But what was it? The Yankee Zoom or
The
Yankee
Bronx
Zoom,
Zoom.
right?
The
Yeah,
Bronx Zoom.
Bronx Zoom. Yeah, yeah. So that one was fine because it came out right away, and it was I thought relevant, but the Dodger one just took too long. Um, but I really liked in the process of doing these, and I guess I shouldn't call them reviews as much as I call them my impact. They're more essays. The one that I really liked was last year's Stealing Home, just about the history of Chavez Ravine, which I've been to so many times. Now I could look at it a whole different way. And then I enjoyed doing the research on that. So if a book causes me to spend a lot of time looking for more, different rabbit holes, I enjoy those more than just a straightforward kind of review.
Now there's also a regional bias, it
Yeah,
seems. For example, I read that book and I didn't like it as much as you did. It was again well done, well received,
right,
from outside of the California area. I don't know how many people are aware of all the
right,
chicanery
right.
that went on in Chavez and or are that interested. Similarly, I don't know how interested people in Los Angeles are about reading about the Yankees so much.
Again, right. So that's what when I talked, that's why when I talked to Eric Nussbaum about it, he had a hard time getting a publisher to agree to it. And I think he ended up getting, what is it,
Bears?
yeah, public affairs to do it. So that's another hint about the book, whether it's going to be good or not to me is who's publishing it and what their intentions are. To me, it was fascinating. The Bobby Valentine book was this publisher I'd never heard of, and it turned out to be some weird. I can't remember what it was that did all kinds of weird fiction and pop culture, and so it was like. So when you see that, you go, "Oh, how many guys turned this one down before he finally got this book to publish it?"
Well, props for sticking with it.
Right,
It's
right.
true.
Right. And there's again in this business of publishing these days, it seems like publishers are willing to do it as long as they don't have to take a big financial risk. And plus, as you know, they don't have to keep a big warehouse of these things. They only print it when you order it. It's easier to ship. So the art of buying and selling and reading a book has become much easier. And less expensive. And I think it's reflected in the book price too. The Nebraska books, I think you almost expect to pay a little more because they're going to be thicker and whatever agreement they have. And I think it's worth it for the most part. But boy, I should have known coming in. I was going to ask about a favorite book that I don't think has been written yet. I guess. No, I can't even think about it because I can't even think of what that might be. I'm looking forward to a book that's coming out about Route 66 baseball because when I did a Route 66 tour a few years ago from Chicago to LA, I noticed how much baseball there is on that trip. And especially you go through Commerce, Oklahoma, Mickey Mantle's hometown, and you hit all these different like large diamond facilities where there's a lot of activity going on. And in the heartland of the country, I think that that's alive and well. And, you know, if, if Dyersville, Iowa could have been on Route 66, it would have been, I think, just because it kind of fit that theme of everything. So it is interesting. From Route 66, you could start at Wrigley Field and end at Dodger Stadium, and that's really the start and the finish of it. And in between, there's so much baseball. And I think that was a book I thought I wanted to write, and I tried to pitch, and I couldn't get it pulled together. And now the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I can't remember the photographer, Jean. Anyway, she's putting out a book now about baseball and Route 66. I think it's coming out pretty soon. It's probably more of a coffee table picture book. But I think that was a book I really thought would be worth having a lot of fun, you know, digging into, seeing like baseball on a New Mexico reservation, or, you know, in different places of Texas, and kind of how baseball reflected that community and what it meant to those different cities. So whether there was a minor league town, Albuquerque's on Route 66, so I could visit the you know, the Isotope Stadium and things like that. So that was a lot of fun to do that. And here in California, you hit a lot of minor league teams in San Bernardino, and there's a team out there called the Inland Empire, and I think they're called the 66ers, which, you know, because of the Route 66. So there's so much tied to that nostalgia. If you can, I think baseball is so much of a nostalgia sport that the more nostalgia you can tap into, the better you're going to have as far as making it, you know, ultimately, if it's a Father's Day kind of gift, it's going to resonate. But I see what you mean too. When you have a regional sort of book, that's why I say when I see another Yankee or Mets book, it doesn't hit me right away, but I'm going to pay attention to it because I want to see what's new with it. Like when Jane Levy did her Babe Ruth book, like what's left to write about Babe Ruth? And she found a new angle, and it was an angle where he spent, you know, an off season out here in California and things like that, you know, barnstorming. So she found a great angle of that.
Well, we always look forward to the new products, and like you
Yeah.
say, we both do the research to see what's coming down the pike.
Yeah.
And there are always a ton of stuff. Some get published, some actually, even though they're listed, for one reason or another, they don't get published,
Yeah.
or they're delayed, or whatever. The publisher might have a change of heart, but it's always something to look forward to every year, as are your 30 books in 30 days. And again, we've been talking with Tom Hoffarth, and I want to thank you for your service and what you do, and continue good luck, and keep on plugging.
You know, we'll both keep on plugging because it doesn't seem to be an end to this, and I think people sort of need some sort of filter as to, you know, and that's the good feedback. Yeah, thanks for writing about this. I wasn't interested. I didn't know it existed. You know, now I'm reading and I'm enjoying it. Or thanks for steering me away from it.
All right, thank you, Tom. Stay well, stay safe.
You too, Ron. Thanks.